Frankly, I was hesitant to record today's video because this opening variation works so well for my private students that I did not want to really share it publicly. But because I love you so much, and also because I didn't have any other good ideas for today's video, I decided to give it a shot, so let's enjoy it together. Now, this opening that we're about to explore today is the French defense, and in particular how to win against the French defense playing white. Now, after pawn d4, pawn d5, the main moves for white here are usually knight to c3, but there is also the move pawn e5, which is a lot simpler. It's called an advanced variation because you advance your pawn. And the good thing that I love about this is that black players pretty much all the time will play the same moves against you here. And that makes it super easy for you to learn because you don't need to know a ton of theory. You just learn one variation and that's it. Why is that so? It's because we've got this pawn chain in the center of the board, which limits black quite significantly. You're locked in this pawn chain with your own pawns, and there is nothing black can do. And because of that, it's hard for black to move their pieces around. For example, this bishop quite stuck behind the pawn wall, can't get out really, can't do anything. This knight from g8 cannot be developed normally to f6, as black normally does in various openings. And if black plays it to e7, it blocks out all the other pieces of black, and overall the black's position is somewhat clumsy. If the bishop wants to be developed to e7, now the knight can't get out. So all in all, you can see that black is not feeling comfortable here, and that's why they hate this pawn chain, they want to get rid of it, and they're going to play pawn c5 and try to destroy your pawn center. That's what most of your pawns pretty much exclusively going to do. Now, you defend this pawn by playing pawn c3, you keep your pawn chain protected. They play knight c6, their plan is still the same, to put as much pressure on the central pawn as they can, and they're trying to do that. You defend it with your knight, and they play queen b6, putting one more piece, which is gonna put pressure onto your central pawn. Now you play bishop d3, which is a developing move, and it sets a nice little trap along the way. Most of your opponents are aware of it, of course, but they're going to take here on d4, knowing that in case you recapture, they cannot take here immediately, because after that, knight takes, queen takes, bishop b5, boom, check to the king, they're going to lose the queen. So they know that, but instead of that, they have other moves which are better for them. At this point, white plays bishop to d3, just developing a piece, and now after pawn takes d4, normally white recaptures, and that leads to a very extensive theory, and this is what your opponents are aware of. But instead of playing that move, we play another move. We play castle, which obviously sacrifices this central pawn here on d4 for quick development. And even though it is also a relatively non-theoretical line, it is much less popular compared to the usual recapture, and therefore a lot of your opponents are unaware of it, or they know very little about it. And it leads to very sharp and very promising positions for you, so let's take a look. Now, black would usually take here on c3, just making sure that they have an extra pawn. You recapture. Now they need to develop somehow, let's say bishop d7, the most played move, and you play bishop e3, offering another gambit pawn, and, well, the most important thing is that you're attacking the queen, of course. What is black going to do about that? Well, there are a couple of nice ways for black to not waste your time and to lose immediately. One of them is playing bishop c5, very natural move, developing a piece, covering the queen, but it fails to knight a4. And you hit the queen and the bishop simultaneously, therefore the next move you're going to capture one of them, and black loses. If not that, then what else? Another interesting move for black to play is pawn d4. Looks like black is winning because this pawn is now, attacks these two pieces, and looks like black is just going to capture one of them on the next move. But that's not the case, because you take here on d4 indeed, and temporarily black wins the piece, but because of this pin, their knight can't get out, and you play queen g4, and on the next move you're going to get it back. Again, the knight can't get out because otherwise they'll lose their queen. And as soon as you get the knight back, the material balance will be equal, but you developed all of your pieces already, and black is completely undeveloped. Therefore, you're going to be just crushing it within just a couple of moves. And what black usually does here is quite funny, because they defend the knight here on d4 by playing bishop to c5, but they overlook the threat along this file. And after queen takes g7, yeah, they secure the knight, but they lose the rook here on h8, and you completely destroy them, so it's time for black to resign. After you played bishop e3 to attack the black's queen here, another natural move for black to play would be capturing your pawn on b2. Looks very advantageous for black, winning a pawn, getting the queen out of danger, attacking the knight here on c3. What more can you ask for from a single move? But it also is a bad mistake, because after knight b5 there are a number of problems for black. The first and most obvious one is knight to c7, which would fork the king and the rook, and that's a major threat. And the other one is a more hidden threat, that the queen on b2 is somewhat trapped here. As you can see, it doesn't have many squares to run away here, and we're gonna exploit that. Now black will need to stop this knight c7 from coming, therefore they play rook c8. And now there are a number of interesting moves for white to play. Stockfish recommends a4, but I also thought in terms of, to make sure that my students don't mix up things here, because I understand that when variations are complicated, it's difficult to remember them, etc. So sometimes I'm not recommending even the best move, but the simplest move. And I think the simplest is rook e1. Bringing the rook into play, and also potentially threatening, somewhat attack the queen from the side, or playing rook b1 and attacking the queen that way. And we're gonna exploit this vulnerable and nearly trapped position of the queen. Let's say black goes a6 to kick away this annoying knight from b5. We're gonna play rook b1, and indeed the queen is gonna be captured here, because after queen takes, rook e2, this time attacking the queen with another rook. The only square to escape would be queen a5, and for a second black thinks that they managed to escape and get away from your attack, but here comes a boom. Bishop b6. A really beautiful little combo, attacking the queen. Now it has nothing else to do but to capture it, and now knight to d6, check to the king, establishes this discovered attack of the queen, and you win the game, because after they take, you win the queen, and, well, you already won the queen, but now you're also attacking the bishop, attacking this pawn, and you're completely dominating here. All things considered, there's nothing else black can do against this threat to the queen but to move their queen all the way back to d8. Sad reality for black that they have to undevelop their queen, and now essentially pretty much all of their pieces are undeveloped, and you, on contrast to that, already developed almost all of your pieces, so you're ready to attack. And right now, indeed, you cannot capture something or checkmate black immediately, but taking into account your overwhelming advantage in activity, you just keep going. You play rook c1, bringing the rook into play. And yeah, because this extra pawn will be a valuable asset somewhere in an endgame later in the game, but right now, thanks to your advantage in activity, you have a very strong attack. Really difficult for black to cope with that. For example, if they play knight e7 to develop their knight, hoping to relocate it somewhere there, then you can stop it temporarily by playing bishop g5, putting also this unpleasant pin to the knight. And funnily enough, in most of the games, black responds with pawn h6. Which loses the game immediately in a nice way. But again, even if they don't miss these tactics, still you can just take a look at this position and see clearly that you have a lot of attacking chances here, a lot of attacking opportunities. Even with simple moves, you can bring your rook to e1, push your h-pawn forward, and you just attack with simple moves. But again, in most of the games they do play this move pawn h6, which fails beautifully to knight b5. We're ignoring this bishop here because we've got a checkmating threat knight d6, and there is nothing black can do to stop that, because the knight from here cannot move away. If the knight moves, we're gonna capture the queen. So the knight cannot unblock, the way or move away somewhere, and if not, if they do anything, then there is just knight d6 checkmate. And the final thing that you gotta be aware of that sometimes students ask me about is, Igor, what if they take here on d4, but after I castle, they don't accept the pawn sacrifice, they don't take here on c3, right? In that case, nothing really changes, because overall the situation remains to be the same. So if they don't take there immediately and they play some awaiting move bishop d7, you also play a kind of awaiting move rook to e1, and you wait for them to capture. And 9 times out of 10 they will capture there anyway, and as soon as they do that, we get into a position very similar to what we just discussed. You have your rook on e1 instead of, compared to the previous lines, but that's a useful position for the rook, defends this pawn and, gets involved into the game. For example, if they go knight e7, you still play bishop e3, all the same stuff with all the same ideas, and you are still having a great compensation for the pawn. Here, there is another little but very nasty trap. If black decides to play d4 in this position, which looks cool for black, looks winning, it fails due to a very interesting tactics. You take here on d4, after they recapture, you just keep capturing here, and temporarily seems like black just won a piece, throughout this exchange. But you've got to move knight b5, which really upsets black here. The knight threatens the queen, threatens knight c7, also threatens knight d6. There is just too much for black to handle, but black may think to himself, hey, wait a second, I can just grab it. Well, in that case, bishop b5 check to the king, but simultaneously discovered attack of the queen. So whatever black does, let's say knight c6 or anything, just queen takes d4, and you want a queen, a clear queen, and it's time for black to resign. The knight is pinned down to the king, so it cannot move, and black cannot recapture here, and black is lost. Let me also mention that it is the final opportunity to join the current cohort of students studying our flagship course, The Secrets of Strong Players, and within just a couple days it will be gone, as well as the 50% discount, 2 extra courses that you can receive for free, as well as your access to our close community of students and to me personally, where you can ask your questions and get support from me. So it all will be gone within just a couple days. So if you're interested, click the link below the video and check all the details. And if you wish, you may join the current enrollment of the students into this course, and I'll do my best to help you progress at chess as fast as you can.